Can you imagine a ship so magnificent, so technologically advanced, that its creators declared it unsinkable? This isn't just a story. It's the legend of the RMS Titanic, a vessel that promised a new era of travel, but delivered one of history's most unforgettable tragedies. Today, we're diving deep into the story of the Ship of Dreams, from its glorious beginning to its icy, tragic end. What really happened on that fateful night, and could it have been prevented? Stick around to find out. Let's travel back to the early 1900s. The world was on the brink of immense change, and nowhere was this more apparent than in the shipyards of Belfast, Ireland. Here, at Harland and Wolff, over 15,000 workers toiled for more than 2 years to bring a Titan to life. The RMS Titanic was a marvel of its time. At nearly 900 feet long, it was the largest man-made moving object in the world, but its size was only part of its allure. The Titanic was designed to be the pinnacle of luxury and safety. Its most celebrated feature was a series of 16 watertight compartments. The design was so clever that the ship could supposedly stay afloat even if 4 of these compartments flooded. This engineering feat is what earned it the infamous nickname, Unsinkable. Inside, it was a floating palace. First-class passengers could stroll up the grand staircase crowned with a magnificent glass dome, dine in opulent restaurants, swim in a heated saltwater pool, or relax in a Turkish bath. It was the absolute peak of Gilded Age elegance. On April 10, 1912, the air in Southampton, England, was electric with excitement. Crowds gathered to witness the start of the Titanic's maiden voyage. With a deafening blast of its horns, the colossal ship pulled away from the dock, destined for New York City. On board were over 2,200 souls, a floating city of dreams and ambitions. The passenger list was a fascinating cross-section of society. In first class, you had some of the wealthiest people in the world, industrialists like John Jacob Astor IV. They were traveling in suites that cost the equivalent of a small fortune today, surrounded by every imaginable luxury. Then, far below decks in third class, or steerage, the reality was starkly different. Here, hundreds of immigrants from across Europe were packed into simple, crowded cabins. They had poured their life savings into this one-way ticket, chasing the promise of a better life in America. For them, the Titanic wasn't a luxury cruise. It was a vessel of hope, carrying them toward a new beginning. This stark contrast between the opulent world above and the hopeful, humble world below is a crucial part of the Titanic's story, a reflection of the deep social divides of the era. As the ship sailed into the open Atlantic, no one, from the richest tycoon to the poorest immigrant, could have imagined the fate that awaited them all in the icy waters ahead. For the first few days, the voyage was smooth. Passengers settled into their routines, enjoying the ship's amenities. But as the Titanic steamed further into the North Atlantic, a hidden danger was lurking. The ship's wireless operators began receiving messages from other vessels, warnings of massive ice fields and large icebergs drifting directly into their path. On Sunday, April 14th, the day of the disaster, at least 7 such warnings were received. So why didn't the ship slow down or change course? Captain Edward Smith, a veteran commander on his final voyage before retirement, was under pressure. The chairman of the White Star Line was aboard, and there was an unspoken desire to make headlines by arriving in New York ahead of schedule. The Titanic continued to race through the dark, moonless night at a blistering speed of 22 knots, nearly her maximum. This decision to prioritize speed over caution would prove to be a fatal mistake. At 11:40 p.m., high up in the crow's nest, Lookout Frederick Fleet's heart stopped. He saw a dark mass looming directly in the ship's path. Iceberg, right ahead. He frantically telephoned to the bridge. First Officer William Murdoch immediately ordered the ship hard to starboard, and the engines reversed. A desperate attempt to swerve around the mountain of ice. But it was too late. The Titanic was too large and moving too fast. For about 10 terrifying seconds, the passengers felt a slight shudder, a grinding vibration that ran along the ship's starboard side. Many barely noticed it, but below the waterline, the iceberg had delivered a mortal wound, punching and tearing a series of gashes along the hull, breaching not just 4, but 5 of the ship's watertight compartments. The unsinkable ship was now doomed. Captain Smith immediately summoned the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, who had been on board for the maiden voyage. After a quick inspection of the damage, Andrews delivered the grim verdict. The math was simple and brutal. With 5 compartments flooding, the bow would be pulled down so far that water would eventually spill over the top of the bulkheads into the next compartment. And then the next, like water filling an ice cube tray. He gave the ship a little over 2 hours to live. The unsinkable Titanic was, in fact, going to sink. The order was given to uncover the lifeboats and muster the passengers. But on the decks, there was no panic at first, only confusion and disbelief. How could this magnificent ship possibly be in danger? This disbelief quickly turned to horror as the ship's bow began to noticeably dip into the water. It was then that the second tragic flaw in the Titanic's design became apparent. There weren't enough lifeboats. The ship carried only 20 boats, enough for about 1,178 people, roughly half the number on board. The regulations at the time were horribly outdated, based on a ship's tonnage, not its passenger capacity. Chaos ensued. The crew, poorly drilled for such an emergency, struggled to manage the evacuation. In the confusion, many of the first lifeboats were launched half-empty, with crewmen fearing the boats would buckle if fully loaded. The policy of women and children first was enforced, but it was interpreted differently on each side of the ship, leading to more chaos and lost opportunities to save lives. In the midst of the escalating terror, incredible acts of courage shone through the darkness. The ship's 8 musicians, led by Wallace Hartley, assembled on deck and began to play cheerful tunes to calm the passengers. They continued playing until the very end, their music a haunting final soundtrack to the tragedy. Many men, including some of the wealthiest, honored the women and children first ruled with their lives, stoically accepting their fate to ensure others had a chance at survival. Wireless operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride stayed at their posts, frantically sending out distress signals. "We are sinking fast, ... Their signals were the only reason any help came at all. As the ship's angle grew steeper, the final moments were terrifying. The lights flickered and then died, plunging the ship into total darkness. With a deafening roar of groaning metal, the Titanic broke in to between its 3rd and 4th funnels. The stern rose almost vertically into the air before it, too, slipped beneath the icy waves, taking more than 1,500 people with it into the abyss. For the 705 survivors huddled in the lifeboats, the horror was not over. They were left floating in the freezing darkness, surrounded by the haunting cries of the hundreds struggling in the water. Then, an eerie silence fell as the cold claimed the last of the victims. Hope arrived around 4 a.m. in the form of the RMS Carpathia. Having received the Titanic's distress call, its captain had pushed the ship to its limits, dodging icebergs to race to the rescue. Over the next few hours, the Carpathia's crew pulled the shivering survivors from the lifeboats, bringing them to safety. The world was left in shock. How could this happen? The disaster led to immediate and sweeping changes in maritime safety. The first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea was held in 1914, mandating that all ships carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board, conduct mandatory lifeboat drills, and maintain a 24-hour radio watch. For decades, the Titanic lay undisturbed, a silent tomb 2.5 miles beneath the ocean's surface. Then, in 1985, a team led by Dr. Robert Ballard finally discovered the wreck, bringing the ship's story back into the public eye. The images of the decaying grand staircase and the ghostly promenade deck serve as a powerful, haunting reminder of that night. The story of the Titanic endures not just as a historical event, but as a timeless lesson about human ambition, social inequality, and the humbling power of nature. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the story of the Titanic. If you found this journey through history fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Let me know in the comments what part of the Titanic's story impacts you the most. Until next time, stay curious!